First of all, I want to take a big opportunity to welcome and thank you all for tuning in this evening. We know your times are very precious, even though some of us are stuck at home and still homebound. We know that time is very tight, so we appreciate you joining in this evening. My name's Kim Sara, and it's a pleasure to welcome you here. Before we officially start, I will also take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of which Monash is located, and also where we'll be tuning in streaming to you from today. My name's Kim Sara. I'm from the Arts faculty, and it's my pleasure to, as I said, to welcome you here this evening. As part of my role, I work very closely with a number of our program directors, one of them being Associate Professor Deirdre O'Neill, who's our program director for the Graduate Certificate and the Masters of Public Policy, which we'll be talking through this evening. As part of this as well, you'll hear a lot about this during the session, but we are also pleased to have joining us Peter Newling, who is the National Manager of Public Policy for Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. Peter, among several other industry advisors, sit on our Industry Advisory Board. So it's very exciting for him to be joining us this evening to share what it's like for this program and also why we need skilled practitioners in the field of public policy. And equally as exciting part of this evening, my fourth person who is here with me is Simon Windley, who's one of our current students, and Simon's kindly offered to join us and share what his experience going into the program has been like, as well as what his experience and studies have been like prior to this. The idea of tonight's session, for those of you who are joining us, is so that we can provide you with plenty of information so you can make the right informed decision on what graduate study will look like for you. And that will be different based on every individual because it could be related to your particular work circumstances. We have a lot of students who are working full-time or part-time and also study with us either full or part-time, as well as obviously what your particular interests or your career trajectory and aspirations are. And we'd be really happy to provide a lot of that for you. So we'll be providing an idea of what's involved in the course, the opportunities that are available to you, as well as how the actual admissions process works. So if you're looking at applying, what do you need to be doing to prepare for that and how will that look? To give you an idea of where this sits for us in terms of our program. So public policy sits within quite a robust suite of programs in the graduate space. And these include 6 months graduate certificates if you're looking to upskill or get started in a particular field, right through to master's programs, which is what we'll be talking through tonight. As you can see here, the reason we put this up is to give you a feel of where there are related and multidisciplinary areas. Obviously, public policy having nice connections with the areas such as international relations, through areas of politics, through development, through environment sustainability, and obviously through areas of political communications and strategic communication as well. But I won't list that whole area there, but there are other options that we do have, which also cross over nicely. What a lot of our students tell us, and also employers who are employing our graduates, some of the big features that you'll see across all of the Monash Arts Masters, so not just public policy, but also the other areas that were listed, are these several areas here. And we find they're quite effective and students enjoy this. One being the flexibility and choice that we offer through those programs. And I'll talk a little more through how this works later on. But some of this flexibility means that we offer different ways of you entering the program. So that means you could come to us with a totally unrelated field and start from scratch and build this up and graduate with the master's program, for example, or you may even receive credit when you're coming to us if you've done something related. But we'll explain how those work later on because obviously that's something you might want to consider. And you'll hear a lot about choice in these programs in terms of how you can structure the programs to suit your interests and your career direction. Second point there, obviously not a lot of international travel happening right now, but Monash as a university does send the most students overseas out of all Australian institutions. So if you're choosing somewhere to study based on those types of global opportunities, this is a perfect place to be doing that. While we've obviously had challenges with COVID-19 this year, typically and obviously looking forward after this situation, we have a number of study tours which sit in the graduate study space. One of them actually featuring in Chile, which you're going to hear about how that works for public policy from Deirdre later. Overseas opportunities can also take the form of an internship, which you can see there as well. So obviously we're going to give you all the background around the particular area that you're looking at studying, but we also want you to be connected with industry. We also want to give you those opportunities to actually be placed out in a professional internship, which is for credit, if you wish to look at that option. These can be taken locally, interstate or overseas. And what's really great about doing that through the arts faculty is there's actually a dedicated work integrated learning team who are basically there for you as students to either help set up internship offerings, or help with you if you maybe have an area in mind that you want to approach. It might be a particular organisation, it might be a department within government, or it could be a non-profit organisation as well, so depending where you want to go. And as I mentioned, they're really great opportunities to, one, get credit towards your degree, but also to build your networks and take advantage of the global network that Monash has. The fourth point there around optional research is a really great consideration there. So some students coming to us are looking at embedding some research, or maybe sitting on the fence between going down maybe an honours pathway or doing something that's purely research. Where this is quite unique is that any of our masters provide an optional component where you may look at including a thesis or a research project. Now that isn't for everybody who comes into this, but it is an option that's there for you. And for someone who might be looking at, say, a PhD or Master's by research later down the track, this actually provides you with the means of applying for that as well. The final point I'll list there, and this is a great opportunity that a number of our students do look at becoming a part of, is the Arts Graduate Leadership Program. This is open to any Arts Master's student who's achieving well with their grades, and it's a curated program throughout the year that our Director of Graduate Studies, Associate Professor Vicky Peel, runs. And what she actually does is she invites high-profile leaders to come in and work with our current students to look at maybe identifying their leadership styles and identifying where their career is heading, and also a series of other career development sessions around networking, around skills development, and identifying where you might want to build further skills and employability. Where you get to actually apply the leadership skills is through an opportunity to mentor incoming master's students, which is also a really good flip side, that if you're coming in to study with us and maybe you haven't studied in a while, or maybe it's the first time studying that field, it means that you will have access to a mentor should you wish to take that option up. So they're just some of the reasons, and you'll hear a lot more about this particular program and why we feel it's quite a strong offering. Now, moving on to the much more exciting part of the session, that I want to take an opportunity to introduce Associate Professor Deirdre O'Neill, who's patiently waiting there, I can see on video. I've actually had the pleasure of working very closely with Deirdre since before this program was officially launched and while it was being put together, and seen what is a really multidisciplinary program that Deirdre's run. We're really pleased to have her within the faculty, as she comes to us with quite an extensive background, having held senior positions within the Australian New Zealand School of Government, and also at Monash with the business school and also with arts. And I'll just take a moment to touch on some of the connections she's got, not just with people like Peter Newling, who you'll hear from today, but also globally. Deirdre's done quite a bit, in particular in Indonesia, working with, am I getting this right, with the Ministry of Transport and
yes.
policing over there? Yes.
And also a Ministry of Villages and decentralisation.
Yes. Yes, so lots of excellent global connections we've got there. So without further ado, Deirdre, I'd love to hand it over to you to talk through what the program's all about.
Thanks very much, Kim, and welcome to all of you to tonight's webinar. And I'm here to tell you about the Graduate Certificate and Masters in Public Policy and what that might offer you, and also, of course, to answer any questions that you might have, although we've also got Peter from our advisory board and Simon, who's a current student, who will be very able to assist in that area as well. So if we can move on to the next slide, Kim, thanks. Okay, so public policy as an area of study is a really interesting one, because as you'll sort of get a sense from these quotes that we have on the screen from people like Naomi Klein and Bill Gates and others, you get this idea that public policy basically affects almost every aspect of our lives, because it's really what governments can do or not do. And public policy, because it comes by government, is something that can be imposed upon us, and we have no choice in terms of how we respond to it. So public policy is something that is relevant to all of us. It's relevant to us in terms of whichever types of careers we might take. If we're in the public sector, for example, obviously we're working in the government space. But equally in business, there's an enormous interface between business and government, particularly in the field of regulation. Not-for-profits, of course, have also a very sort of complex relationship with government. So in terms of where you might see yourselves going, it's pretty clear, whether it's in government or in business or in the not-for-profit space, that public policy would be very likely to be highly relevant to the sort of work that you'll be doing. Okay, so it's of growing importance nationally and globally, that we're very conscious of events internationally and how they impact upon us. But equally at the national level, decisions are taken that affect regional levels and local government as well. So public policy, as I say, is a very pervasive aspect of our lives. And it does cross all sectors. What do we do in this program? What we prepare our graduates for is a very changing and volatile world that they'll be working in, and where their careers may move from government to business and back again, or from a not-for-profit into government and out. That sort of mobility is simply the norm now, whereas once it was very different. So with our program, I always think that we have, in effect, we target two key student cohorts. The first is that there may be students who've emerged or graduated fairly recently from an undergraduate degree and are looking to prepare themselves in a career sense, you know, to make themselves employer ready, so to speak, and ready to move seriously into the workforce. The second category that I think we target this program at are those people who are currently working in a space that is relevant to public policy, but who are looking to sharpen skills and deepen knowledge in a way that will help to accelerate their careers. So we have those, the program I think caters for both cohorts in a way that I think is beneficial to them, and the interaction between those cohorts, of course, I think is hugely, because we have a very interactive style of teaching in this program, that interaction where people learn from one another, I think is a really valuable benefit from the program. So Kim talked about flexibility and choice in this degree. And I'd like to start by talking about the teaching approach that we have in the program. Firstly, we adopt what we'd call a blended teaching approach. And it's one where there is learning both online and face-to-face. We find that this approach is very well suited to people who are currently in the workforce, to people who have work commitments. What that blended approach allows you to do is to basically to control, I guess, the way you approach your learning, particularly the learning that is online, which you can do, you know, when it suits you and fit around different commitments. The face-to-face teaching is then of an intensive mode. It may be a sort of a series of, let's say, 4-hour classes over a period of, say, 6 weeks, or it may be delivered quite differently. But with the intensive classes, the idea is that what you've maybe learned about in your preparatory reading, you can then explore in much greater depth in that face-to-face class. So we have this blended teaching approach. We also have an accelerated option so that people who come in and take the longer versions of the degree, the 96 credit point and 72 credit point, they're taught over 2 years full-time or 18 months full-time. They can actually be accelerated by taking winter courses or summer courses, and there are other things that can be done as well. So people who'd like to come in and get the degree completed as quickly as they can have that option as well. The way the course is constructed is that you start with foundation or core units, and these units provide you with really critical skills and knowledge to be policy practitioners or to be policy advocates, or to understand the way policy is made and work effectively around that. So when you come into the program, you would be taking a number of these core units, which I'll discuss in a little bit, but that core learning and understanding is then complemented by policy specialisations. And again, this is where the program offers considerable choice, because as you can see on the slide, we have, I think, 11 policy specialisations in areas like health and social policy, sustainability and the environment, transport and infrastructure, family violence prevention, diplomacy and international trade, and so on. These are all really critical, relevant areas of public policy. But more importantly, when we offer these specialisations, we're drawing upon the very significant depth and expertise that Monash University has in these areas. So these are areas of, international standing that the university has, and we can offer them teaching and learning in these areas as policy specialisations. And you can choose to take one of those, or you can actually create your own policy specialisation. So we don't force people to take a specialisation. We can say, you can say to us, well, I think I'd like to combine, this amount of study and, subject to all the usual rules. That's quite doable. So that's, I think, real flexibility. Now, in terms of the policy specialisations, I just might add that we're hoping from next year, confident from next year, that we'll also be offering specialisation in criminology, which is, I think, a terrific addition to the program, and again, an area of real expertise that Monash and standing that Monash has. So on top of the core skills and core understandings and foundation knowledge in public policy and policy specialisation, the program offers students the opportunity to make really valuable industry connections and through capstone units. So the program has 4 capstone choices that you can take. One is an internship, or what we call work integrated learning. And as Kim said, this might be in Australia, it could be internationally. We also offer a study tour to Latin America, which is based in Santiago in Chile. Simon, who will be speaking, one of our current students will be speaking shortly, took this study tour in January. So he'll have all the, he can tell you what he felt about it. But this study tour, which we offer in conjunction with the University of Chile, which is one of the best universities in Latin America, enables students to stay and study for 2 weeks in Santiago and learn about the types of political, economic and social challenges and opportunities that confront Latin America today, Latin America and Chile in particular, sharing a sort of Pacific rim with us, sharing an interest in things like free trade. Chile, like Australia, is highly reliant on resources and agriculture and needs to think about how it can reduce that reliance and also expand trade opportunities. So it's a really fascinating tour, study tour, and we find that the teaching on it by our colleagues at the University of Chile, which is all in English, is really excellent, and it's complemented by site visits to industries and to government agencies. And it's a fantastic opportunity for students not just to be in a particularly great part of Latin America, which they can then, can take the opportunity to take further travel after the program. So there's, I suppose, the travel opportunity, but there's also, I think, a really valuable networking opportunity that you get when you undertake a program like this and in a foreign country. So that's the Latin American study tour. In addition, some students will take a research project as their capstone unit. They might decide that what they really want to get out of the program is much deeper knowledge in a particular policy area, which they can achieve by undertaking a research project. Sometimes students have a particular type of professional interest, or their work is keen for them to pursue a particular interest, and they can align this with the research project. Research projects are undertaken under supervision of academic staff within the faculty. And then the final option that students have is to undertake what's called a research thesis, which is a pathway into a PhD. So it's the equivalent of doing an honours year. If you don't already have an honours, have completed an honours year, a research thesis, is a way that can lead into undertaking a PhD or a Masters by Research. And again, these are supervised by staff in the faculty. Okay, so if you come into the program, what does your study program look like? Well, if you come into the program and you don't, and your undergraduate degree is in an area that's really unrelated to the social sciences, maybe you've done a degree in biology or mathematics or something similar, then you would be doing the 2-year full-time degree, and you would be taking 4 core units out of that we offer: foundations of public policy, policy analysis and evaluation, governance and public sector reform, in addition to smaller units taught in the faculty on strategic political leadership and communication and intergovernmental relations. In addition, you would take your policy specialisation, or you might take the research thesis if you're thinking or wanting to do or have that PhD pathway. And then there's the internship option, which is the capstone option: internship, the study tour, or the research project. So that's over 96, that gives you a 96-point degree. It's 2 years full-time, and that can be shortened potentially, accelerated by taking studies in winter and summer semester, and also looking at some other options as well. If your undergraduate degree is in what's not called, in academic speak, a cognate discipline, that is to say, in an area of the social sciences, it could be economics, it could be law, it could be history, psychology, politics, languages. If it's in the area of social sciences, then you qualify for the 72-point entry into the program, which is completed in 1.5 years of full-time study. So if you come into this part of the program, this entry level, you take 3 core units, and they are foundations of public policy, governance, or public sector reform. You take one or you take either of those, policy analysis and evaluation, and you have the capstone unit, the internship, the study tour, or the research project. They're compulsory. And then if I just go back, the second component, sorry, of that 72-point version of the degree is that you do a specialisation, policy specialisation, or a research thesis. And that is that degree. If you come in at the 48-point entry level, this assumes that you have an honours degree in a cognate discipline, an honours degree in an area of the social sciences or equivalent. And in this version of the degree, it's completed in 1 year of full-time study, and you take the three core units, again, foundations of public policy, governance or public sector reform, policy analysis and evaluation, and you take one of those capstone options, the internship, the study tour to Latin America, or the research project. And that's then your master's degree completed. The graduate certificate is a very new addition to our offerings, and what it does is it provides an entry point into the program, and I think in a sort of colloquial sense, it allows people to put their toe into the water and test whether, postgraduate study perhaps is for them. A graduate certificate involves the completion of 2 12 credit point units. And yes, they can be taken over 2 semesters or in 1 semester of full-time study. So if you came in semester 1, you'd take Foundations of Public Policy and Public Sector Reform, and then you would qualify for your graduate certificate. If you enter in semester 2, you could take governance, this is assuming you're a full-time student, governance or policy analysis and evaluation. If you're part-time, well, of course, you spread your choice of units over those semesters. So when you graduate with a graduate certificate, this can articulate with credit into the Masters. So if you complete 24 points of study in a graduate certificate, that's 24 points of a Masters that you have completed. So it's quite conceivable that having completed the graduate certificate and finding that your experience of postgraduate study has been a good one and a positive one, and you're keen and eager to learn more, that you then continue on with the master's program, and you've already completed quite a significant part of it. So I think that in itself is a bonus. So they're the 2 offerings that we have: a master's degree or a graduate certificate. If you enter in the graduate certificate, as I say, it leads directly into our master's program. And so,
thank you, Deirdre. I think that speaks really nicely around the course offering. There's flexibility and choices, and obviously a lot there, whether you're looking at the graduate certificate or the master's. As both Deirdre and I have mentioned this evening, we're really pleased to welcome Simon here, in particular because I've been chasing Simon down to join me for an event recently, and he's now finally able to join because we've had a few hiccups with COVID-19, so I'm very excited to welcome him here. What we're really excited to basically ask Simon to share before tonight, we actually asked him to reflect on what his background was prior to entering the Master of Public Policy in terms of study and work. And a big question I know a lot of future students often ask us is, well, what made you choose that? And a few other things I'd love to also hear would be around maybe some of the favourite aspects of the program and where that might look at leading you. So Simon, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Alrighty, thanks so much, Kim. Thank you all for being here and letting me speak to you. So my background is a bit of a strange one, really. I hadn't done any social sciences leading up to this point. I was all predominantly in science and biomedical research. So I did a 3-year or 4-year undergraduate science course at Monash. And then I started my PhD. So I started research in biomedical science at the University of Melbourne. So I started looking at how babies develop and all of those things. And coming towards the end of that, I had a little bit of spare time. I was waiting on some of my experiments to come through and finish, and I didn't really want to start writing my thesis. And I stupidly thought, well, why not start a second postgraduate course? And somehow thought that public policy would be the best thing to do as a result. Who decides to start a second postgraduate course? I'm not so sure. Definitely not the sane ones among us, but somehow I was just drawn. I've always been obsessed with politics, loved it so much, and I really did want to learn more. And that's what really drew me to starting a Masters of Public Policy. Why I chose the MPP at Monash is another good question. I did look around a lot. I had contemplated whether to start a Masters of Public Health instead. It was more in line with my research background in biomedical research. And I had looked at a lot of policy options offered by a range of universities, but I was really quite drawn to the flexibility offered by Monash's programs. And when I enter into these things, I'm also a bit of a stickler. So I did look at all of the units that I had to do, and I found myself getting strangely excited by all of the offerings. And so I just went for it. And applying, I know this is going to come up later as well, applying was also very easy. So I was sitting at my desk, avoiding writing my thesis, and I was like, you know what, let's just do it. And within about an hour, I was able to get my application up and running as well. Having applied, my research background fortunately meant I was able to be offered the 72 credit point structure. So I was able to complete this one in 18 months. I'm in my last unit now with Deirdre, which is very exciting. And so this meant I didn't necessarily have to do the foundational units, which were political communication and leadership, intergovernmental relations, and then only doing one of public sector reform or governance. But I'm a bit of a policy stickler, and I got really excited by those foundational units. And so I decided to do those as my elective anyway, which meant, and if you do choose to do that, then your specialisation would be in public administration. So that's essentially what my specialisation will be at the end of this one. So that's been one of my favourite aspects. One semester in, however, I did get a full-time teaching position, which was exhausting. So not only now was I doing research and a master's, I also had a full-time job, but the flexibility offered by this program was really, really beneficial. So a lot of my classes had been moved to be held at Caulfield in the second semester, and these were held from 5 till 9. So it meant I could get to there from work. I work in the city, so I could get there in a sufficient time without taking too much time off of work, and do the classes in the evenings, which really helped as well. I also really love the flexibility in a lot of the assessments. So as Deidre had pointed out, public policy is kind of insidious. It invades all aspects of our lives. And as a result, everyone's interest in public policy is really quite different. And in a lot of the units, you have a lot of scope to analyse any area of public policy that really interests you. And so I'm sure as an assessor, it's really quite interesting because you might read an essay on, what did I write about? I wrote about stem cell research because it was something I was familiar with and really fascinated about. Then other people might be writing about educational reform or just anything that you find fascinating. And given that you can really guide your own studies and things around areas that really fascinate you, I think was really great. So I could learn a whole lot more about things that I was really passionate about, whilst also learning a whole lot more about things I had no idea about. The program also, it welcomes a whole range of people. So we have people working in the prison sector. We had people working with Vic Police. I came from a science and research background. And so it was just interesting to hear all of those points of view from all of these different areas in class. And so it did make for some really rich areas of discussion. Because a lot of the policy instruments that are involved in making policy are the same across sectors, but the way in which they're implemented can be really, really different. And hearing how this has impacted people's professional lives makes for a really rich discussion in the classes as well. So I also really, really enjoyed that. Another thing that I particularly loved, so for the core unit, I went to Chile, as Deidre mentioned briefly earlier as well. So earlier this year, I did get to be in South America. I was lucky enough that being a teacher at the moment, I was on school holidays, so I was able to take that time off and be in South America. And that unit was just so cool. We went at the perfect time. There's a little bit of social unrest in Chile as they're vying for a new constitution. And so, yes, it was great for us to see that come to the forefront. But even if you go next year or the year after, you're going to face a Chile that's implementing a new constitution and taking into account all of these views from all of these stakeholders. And so it's going to be a fascinating time to be in Chile for 5 years to come. So anytime you do this study tour would be fantastic. And as Deidre said, this is also supplemented by visits to a lot of local businesses. So Codelco is one of the biggest copper manufacturers in the world, is in Chile. We also had a visitor from the Australian ambassador to Chile. So I just got all of these really awesome experiences and really goes to show where this degree can go. Why I chose the study tour? Well, it was a great opportunity to travel some more. I hadn't traveled in a little while, and it was a great chance to get out. But I was also really fascinated by the research project, and I did do a lot of research into that. I couldn't quite fit it in with my full-time work at that point, but the work integrated learning team were really helpful in finding places for me, despite me not being able to continue with it. But a lot of different organisations offer these internships anyway. So places like the Grattan Institute, who's a policy think tank in Parkville over here, offer both winter and summer internships. And I know the WIL team are really great in helping you incorporate these into your studies if you do want So finally, I know a lot of people ask me if I have any kind of dream role as a result out of this degree. And honestly, as someone that kind of stumbled into this degree, I certainly don't have a dream role. It was never really my ambition to be in the public sector or be in public life, but it doesn't mean that this degree isn't just so helpful. Taking the public out of policy is involved in all aspects of commercial life. I think anyone returning to work at the moment will find that all workplaces have policies around returning to work, around social distancing and things like that. And just being able to understand policy. So one of the core units is analysing policy, analysing how it's implemented. It invades all aspects of your life, and being able to properly understand these things, I think is really valuable in any kind of professional settings. Despite not having a dream policy role, I think I'll certainly utilise a lot of these skills going forward. So, and understanding, whatever business I work for and that setting in both the public and private sectors. So, yeah, hopefully that covers all of the aspects, but I'll be sticking around if you have any questions as well.
Thank you so much, Simon. It's really lovely to hear that honest perspective and also your actual whole journey from deciding on the program through to what you've actually done in there. Some of those particular units, which I can tell from the way you spoke about it, that you've really genuinely enjoyed. Obviously the content, but also the student mix that's in the classroom with you as well. And as Simon mentioned, we will have a bit of a Q&A later. So if anyone does have questions that they're burning to ask at the moment, feel free to put that into the chat function. What I'd love to do before we move on to the Q&A and just details around how you apply, as we've touched on, Peter Newling has joined us from Morris Blackburn Lawyers, who also sits on our industry advisory board. And he's been patiently waiting online with us. And we've actually got him here tonight to talk through, given that his industry advisory role and this list of roles that our current students are working in, which Deirdre has kindly provided, I'm wondering if maybe Deirdre and also Peter yourselves would like to talk through some of these types of roles, the need that I would say in the across all the sectors for people to be highly skilled in these particular areas, and where the degree adds that value. If you'd like to talk through that.
I'd like to invite Peter to speak, if that's okay.
I'm right here. I hope you can hear.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Great. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks,
Hi, and
Peter.
thanks very much for inviting me along. It's lovely to be here. It's been terrific to hear from everybody that's spoken so far about the range and versatility that a master's or a qualification in public policy can offer you. When you ask the average person in the street, where do you find people who work in public policy? Of course, they usually just identify government at all levels as the place to find them. And whilst that's true, we're everywhere. Public policy folk are absolutely all over the place. I loved listening to the list of possible involvements that you can have while doing the course. So things like spending quality time looking at how public policy works in health and the social environment and sustainability in the environment, or in transport and that sort of stuff. And for every government area that looks at that sort of stuff, of course, there's a range of organisations that also have people working in them that have a particular interest in influencing that policy and how that works. And so not only are public policy people engaged in government, both at the federal and at the state and local levels, but they're also very much involved in corporations, in charities. And in fact, when I actually went through this course, I was working in public policy for a number of Australia's largest charities. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a sec. But there's government authorities as well, of course. Industry groups and peak bodies, of course, are tremendous places for the engagement of public policy professionals. And I was really interested to hear Simon's experience of going through the course with with the people from the police, from prisons and that sort of stuff. I know that I went through the course with folks from like the Heart Foundation, various peak industry bodies and that sort of stuff, union bodies. And so, yeah, the need for public policy is right across every single sector of work in Australia. Perhaps if you're looking for how does that actually work, how whilst it's pretty clear cut to see how qualifications in public policy can be very useful to someone who works in government, how it might apply in a different setting. If I tell you a little bit about what I do and how it works there, you might be thinking, Maurice Blackburn, law firm, why on earth would a law firm need to engage with public policy? And to sort of get an understanding of that, if I just talk a little bit about what it is that the firm does, with Maurice Blackburn and other firms like us, everything's about representing the little guy who's butting up against the big guy in some way. So, for example, it might be like a mesothelioma sufferer or something who's butting up against a James Hardy, or it might be a victim of abuse butting up against a church for the stuff that's gone in the past, or could be a victim of wage theft butting up against insert name of any celebrity chef that you can think of, you know, off the tip. Those sorts of things. So that's what we do. So our involvement with public policy is pretty simple. If we can make life better for those people that we work with by trying to influence how public policy works, then it's well worth us being involved in. And so what does that look like? Well, it could be that there might be, for example, a Senate inquiry that's looking at something like wage theft. And if the senators are looking at wage theft, they'll look to organisations who are engaged with that sort of stuff. So employer groups, industry groups, those of us who represent victims of that sort of stuff, union groups and that sort of stuff, they'll bring us together and talk about, well, how do we make this better? How do we influence the current legislation to make it a better environment for those who have suffered from wage theft and try and stop it happening into the future? So if that's the case, then yes, we might generate a submission to that Senate inquiry and then go in and work directly with them to come up with a better outcome than if the senators had just decided to try and write it themselves. It might be something like an organisation like the Productivity Commission doing an inquiry into mental health or something like that, and we can go and talk to them about the experiences that people with mental health issues maybe have in the workplace or something like that, and work with them to generate the best possible public policy solution coming out of their review. And of course, we're seeing a lot of things like royal commissions at the moment and that sort of stuff. They're great opportunities to get there. If Treasury is trying to figure out how to implement the outcomes of, say, the Banking Royal Commission, they might draft up some legislation to respond to one of the regulations, and invite a bunch of organisations from right across the sector to come in and say, talk us through this. What do you see in our approach? How can we make it better? And if there's one thing that you see by working in this space, there is always a genuine desire to ensure that the policy that ends up coming out is the best that it can be. And so the genuineness of the consultation process is really, really important. So how does the course help those sorts of skills develop? The thing that it taught me was, most importantly, it shows me how the public policy the policy development space works. Even though I'm not working in that area, it's important to know how it works and how it happens, And then once you know how it happens, you can determine how you can best influence that, will best help develop the best public policy coming out of it. As mentioned earlier, you also learn a lot about the analysis and the evaluation of policy, which is really important to know in trying to come up with the best solutions to be able to put forward. It taught me how to clearly define the issue. If you don't know what it is that you're trying to argue in the first place, then you're never going to get anywhere from a policy perspective. So it's, yeah, that ability to clearly define the issue, look at it from every angle, and then come up with a range of possible solutions or public policy approaches that might work. And then importantly, the course gave me the tools to be able to evaluate those options. The flexibility of teaching modes is really important. If you are working at the moment, it gives you the chance to maybe keep doing that whilst you're doing your studies, which is really useful. It means you don't have to take 2 years out of your life just to get those quals. If I can just talk from my own experience as well, if you get the chance to do the international thing, do it. It's awesome. I did that, not Chile, I did the one that they were offering prior to that. But it's just an amazing experience to get out and work with public policy experts in a completely different culture, and you learn so much from doing that. The other thing which I'd say is I came back into study after quite some time out of it. And found the course really useful as a means for getting back in. And they go to great lengths to helping you if you've been out of the study environment for a while, to bring you back in and to get your thinking in that way. So don't use that as a, don't be scared of that. If you've been out of it for a while, trust them to help you through that process. And if necessary, hit me up for an internship if the sort of stuff that we do sounds of interest to you. So so hopefully that gives a bit of an overview of the breadth of public policy and a career in public policy. It's much broader than just working in government.
Thank you so much, Peter. One, for the generous offer of internships, but also for that really beautifully articulated summary of where someone like yourself, but also other roles people can see themselves in. What Deirdre's put up in this slide as well that I think is quite interesting is seeing where, and Simon touched on this a little bit, is where some of the current students are also working. So it's also quite interesting to see where people are coming from with their background and also where they're wanting to go into in the particular areas of policy. So thank you so much, Peter. Really appreciate that insight. Before we move into the Q&A, this set should stay beyond 6 o'clock if you do want to keep asking us questions. But just quickly on how this actually works, if we've excited you with what we've talked through, in terms of next steps, our next intake is semester 2 this year, and that starts in the first week of August. I'm really pleased to hear that Simon said his experience applying was really easy. The link is there if you want to screenshot this, save it, or take a photo of that there. It's all done online. And essentially what will happen is you'll go into it step by step. You'll be prompted for the course you want to apply for and any supporting documentation. So obviously if you're looking at supplying your academic transcripts of whatever you've previously completed, we'll then get back to you on the outcome of that. And in terms of your entry points, which we've talked about in a moment, where you may potentially receive credit, you'd be pleased to know we'll automatically assess that for you. You don't have to tell us, hi, I'd like to be considered for that entry point. We'll automatically do it for you. So in terms of those entry points there, to recap in terms of what you're required to achieve to get into the course, we're looking at you having completed a bachelor degree and having achieved a 60% weighted average mark in that degree. In terms of, to recap on what Deirdre really well put together around those entry points, we have a 1 year, 1.5 year and 2 year option. The 2 year is for those who may have an unrelated field from their previous studies, the 1.5 year being you've got something related, or the 1 year being maybe you have quite a higher level qualification that's related. That could be honours or maybe another postgraduate qualification. The graduate certificate, which can be a really nice way to either pathway into the masters if you don't meet the requirements to get straight in, or as Deirdre said too, this is a nice way of testing some of those units out to see if that's what you want to go into with some credit. The graduate certificate, like we said, is 6 months long if it's full-time, or 1 year if it's done part-time from that.